Good afternoon and welcome to this first Lunch and Learn of a new series at Beyond Autism. Really pleased to see so many of you already in the attendee list. It's great. We'll just give it a few more moments for a few more people to attend. Do use the chat box so to say hello. It'd be great to find out where you're coming from, where you're based today. I'm David Anthony. I'm Head of Research and Learning at Beyond Autism. I've been with the organisation since around 2015. And I've worn many different hats in that time. So head teacher, head of our adult service as well. And now I run our research and learning department. And that includes things such as our outreach and training. And as part of that, we wanted to be able to offer sessions throughout the year, half an hour bite-sized pieces where we could share some of the work we're doing and some of our expertise with other people, but also to hear your experiences and your questions around different topics. So the session today is recorded and it will be available online to listen to afterwards. Do use the comment box to communicate with each other. We have Dan in the behind the scenes who is helping with technical questions. So if you are struggling with any of that, just drop Dan a message in the chat and he'll be able to help you. Dan's also moderating any questions today, so he will be feeding those through to me so we can have a Q&A at the end of the session. So it'll run for about 30 minutes, hopefully. There are some handouts as well and some resources for you to take away, so please do make the most of that. Today's session is free of charge. It's absolutely available to anyone and everyone, and like I say, it is being recorded and we will send out some feedback at the end, so it'd be really great to hear your thoughts. So today is all about developing person-centered plans, and I'm going to take you through how we use person-centered plans, particularly in our outreach work, but also how you might be able to utilize them in your services, or if you have a son or daughter who is requiring support. So Beyond Autism, we have a very clear mission statement to ensure that everyone with autism has access to an education which empowers a life full of choice, independence, and opportunity. And those three things, choice, independence, and opportunity, sit right at the heart of person-centered planning. Person-centered plans are all about developing opportunities and choice, but having that person at the center of the planning. I think many of us think we do person-centered planning, and we're going to look at some of the practices which we do see out there, but actually how can we just adjust what we're doing to make sure that we can get the best possible outcomes. Person-centered plans are all about listening, creating a safe space. Our organisation is very much around reducing school placement breakdown, increasing employability, and we have this notion that everyone should live their ideal week and have the skills to be able to do that. And person-centered plans are very much around creating the best possible outcomes, the best possible life for individuals, particularly those for us who are autistic or have similar diagnosis or barriers to accessing life. So person-centered plans are very much at the heart of this. This idea of increasing resilience and confidence in families. Informed families, parents who have the knowledge to make choices and decisions for their children are in a better position when they have hold of that information. And person-centered plans can really help inform the choices and opportunities what are available for their children. And fundamentally, we want autistic people we come into contact with to be supported in their communities and be part of communities that they live in and access, hopefully on a day-to-day basis. So some of the outcomes from the session today, like I say, we'll run till about 12:30 and we'll open up for questions. But I'd like to share a better understanding of person-centered plans and how they might work for learners and adults. Like I say, my background is pretty much split 50-50 between working with children and adults. So I do think person-centered plans have a place for both. And actually, initially, my experience of them were with adults. I want to share a set of resources with you. Some we've produced ourselves, but some other organizations which are absolutely fantastic and we should be using and accessing, and be inspired to make person-centered planning part of your normal way of working, particularly if you're on the call today and you're a Senko or a teacher, how we can actually make a few adjustments to make sure what we're doing is truly person-centered. So this might sound really obvious, but at the heart of this is appreciation for the individual, and really an acknowledgement that the person we're trying to support and the plan is around has value. They're appreciated by the people around them. They're somebody who has something to say, and the people around them are going to listen. And at the heart of person-centered planning is that full value that that person has something to contribute. Person-centered planning is also about creating a safe space where the person being supported or who needs to access support has a space which is safe to do so, and the people around them are skilled in being able to understand and listen. And many of the people that require support have lots of different levels and abilities when it comes to communication. So creating a space of people and a group of people who understand how to listen to that particular individual and can communicate with them, which is often can be one of the challenges in our line of work and our lives. Open to what possibilities there are out there. And when you've had experience of supporting or trying things, we often reach for the same solutions again and again. Often that's because their resources were available to us. We tried them before and they've worked, so they might work again. But actually coming to person-centered planning with an open mind that actually there might be a broader range of approaches we can use to support a person who needs help. And then appreciation that the person being supported might have lived quite a limited life in comparison to other people or their peers due to the barriers that they have accessing education or the community, and coming to a person-centered plan with the notion that that person might not know what all the opportunities are that are available to them, and coming to person-centered planning with an idea that there are endless possibilities that we can provide and solutions. So a real appreciation that the person we're supporting has a voice and has something to say. So person-centered planning, defining what it actually is. From looking at more adults, it's how a person wants to live their life, but that can be applied to students and children, and what is required to make that possible. So taking what that person values, what's important to that person, how they see their day, and how they want their life to be lived, and all the things what are required to make that happen, and things we can put in place to make that happen. There's definitely evidence that suggests that person-centered planning, the idea, has been around since the 1970s. And there's been a lot of drift in actually how person-centered plans are implemented, how people perceive them and what they actually are. And there's this resurgence of person-centered dialogues, and it started reappearing much more again in policy, and particularly in the code of practice. And it's really, really interesting, the code of practice 2014, 2015, what it talks about person-centered plans and putting children and families at the heart of planning. And it's not on screen, but on page 136 of the code, it talks about enabling children and families to express their views. It's not just about asking them what their views are, it's about enabling, giving them the tools to be able to communicate how they want to be supported, what they want from their life. And actually, a person-centered approach will enable that to happen and will provide the structures and processes so someone is able to communicate those things. And it's not just about asking their views, it's about making sure the structures are in place for it to happen. So kind of said what it is, but it's also really important to acknowledge what person-centered plans shouldn't be. It's definitely not assessment. When we carry out assessments, they have a very strategic, very focused goal in how they're conducted, the environments, and actually they're not always centered around the individual about how they will best perform in the sense of environment, the person running the assessment. Person-centered plans are definitely not an assessment, but they can produce outcomes and objectives for that young person or adult, which may later involve assessments. But the ethos of person-centered planning is about to establish that plan for the future. And they're also not about services. They're not about what services are available in the such of what they already provide. It's the services and the support comes afterwards, as part of that planning, but it certainly shouldn't be service focused. And all of us, we encounter lots of different services in our lives, but that's not what defines us. That's not who we are. And person-centered planning is really about uncovering that and discovering that. So why might we use them? So many of the learners that we encounter at Beyond Autism and adults have a real difficulty around making choices and making decisions. And I think any 13, 14-year-old you might come across certainly starts to feel the pressure of, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my future? What do you want to be when you grow up? All of those type of questions. And actually making those big decisions as well as really small decisions about how I want to spend my weekend can be really, really challenging when communication is a barrier, or the way you communicate is a barrier. So person-centered plans are really great for choice making and encouraging people to have a voice, and enabling them to have a voice in the decision-making process. And like I say, all about planning for the future. What are those outcomes, aspirations? And this is all very aspirational. It should be blue sky thinking. How do we reach those opportunities and ambitions, and really knocking down the walls and ceiling and thinking what can actually be achieved. Problem solving is a real key feature of person-centered plans. And in my work in outreach, where I work with other schools, person-centered plans are the first step in problem solving for that learner and the problems they're encountering in their school. So it can definitely be used as a problem-solving tool. Planning for independence, we have an adopted motto at Beyond Autism around just enough support, because we acknowledge that too much support can take away choice and control and opportunity for that young person, but also just having enough support to succeed and be able to get on to the next step. So planning for independence and looking at support is a really useful way of using person-centered planning. Managing transitions and life changes, particularly that primary to secondary school, secondary to FE, and then into adulthood as well. Those contexts, those environments are all so different, particularly that jump from year 6 to year 7. It's such a huge different environment often our learners find themselves in. So really making sure that they're supported in the best possible way is really, really important. And often some people might get a diagnosis for the first time, and actually, it's an opportunity to look at what support should look like for that young person. And I say should look like for that person, what support that young person wants, and then being informed about what those options could be. Sometimes when it's unclear what a person's values or needs are, really working with a person to discover what's important to them. And like I say, we can often in services have a shelf of all these different interventions, and we have tried and tested interventions, and we pick the intervention and we offer it to a family and a child, and we run the intervention, but no consideration has been given to the wider context of that young person and actually how this intervention fits with their motivations, their values, and their needs. Overcoming new challenges and creating a proactive approach to support. So person-centered planning is not all about waiting till the problem occurs. It's about being proactive and actually mapping out what that future or what the next 2 weeks to a year might look like and beyond. It can be a really useful tool for that as well. So what do they look like? I've been talking about this abstract concept maybe for some people, and actually person-centered plans look different to every single individual, but there are some structures that we have in place and some scaffolding we can use to make sure that we get the best possible plans um, created. What I will say is it's very much about collaboration. It's very much driven by the individual. Um, and some of those key features are it's at person focus. They're at the center of the plan. They're included in the plan, um, and they're the consistent thread throughout. And they should be included in the conversations and the actual meetings and be a personal driver of those. Um, and I know some people on the call might think, well, my young person might not be able to sit in those meetings and contribute. It's about adapting that environment. It's all about them, adapting the environment, getting them included. And even if they can't communicate in any traditional sense, just being present will often have an influence on that room and the people. And particularly if a student has conditions such as PMLD, just being present in the room, soaking up that environment, seeing friendly faces, being part of the communication, what's happening in the room is just so important. So being present. Someone who's going to plan and facilitate or coordinate this in a school, it's often the Senko, but it doesn't have to be. Mobilizing and involving, activating this social network and not Facebook and stuff, the actual network around this person who knows this person the best and has their best interests at heart. And we'll look a little bit at that and establish a way of recording the plan. And we'll share some templates and have a look at those. And the most important thing is important to and important for. So setting up a person-centered planning meeting, think about that time. What's the best time for that individual? Not what's the best time for you. We probably work 9 to 5, 9 to 6, 9 to 7, but it's not about us. It's about that person. When do they perform at their optimum? When is their best time of day? And you might not know that because that's why you're doing the plan, but if they're a morning person, let's run the planning session. Let's run their person-centered plan in a morning. What days are best for them when they don't have such a demanding day or day where they're feeling more rested? And where's it going to take place? Where are they going to feel most comfortable? And how are they going to communicate? Who knows their communication style the best? And who's going to be involved in facilitating that communication if not everyone who's attending might not be used to that? And that network. So I've just put some suggestions there. Siblings are often the biggest supporters of people who have disability. So don't forget them. The teaching assistant is often the person who spends the most time with someone who requires support if they've already got some level of support. No one knows a child better than the parents. They've often been with them from the moment they're born right up to that point. Or if they're adopted, once they've been adopted. And it's really, really important that that parent voice is there. But also acknowledging that if we are working with 16 plus, 18 plus, that, again, we're always valuing that individual voice of that person we're supporting. Care staff have such a unique view as well. So if they access respite already, getting their voices is super, super important. So what goes into the plan? So that important too. This is really about unpicking what does that young person value? What's the most important thing to them? And I'm not talking about accessing the sensory room. I'm not talking about going to school via local authority transport, etc. This is about what makes that person tick, what makes them smile, what's their purpose of getting up in the morning, and really breaking down what they value in life. And Beyond Autism, we'll often use those motivations as a real access point to be able to teach. But in this sense, it's really making sure that those aspirations and outcomes in the future match what that person values. Then the important four is all the structure, what goes around that important too. So if being creative with art, painting is really, really their motivation, their aspiration, their strength, then what we want to do is make sure that important four is setting up opportunities for that outlet to be nurtured. Often in the education sector, we work on filling the gaps, the deficiencies, and looking at where the weaknesses are and trying to get the weaknesses to the strengths. And that is important, but a real focus should be on identifying those strengths, because our strengths are often become our coping strategies. And when we're good at something, the change in our confidence is just absolutely amazing, particularly with young people and teenagers. So really taking advantage of those strengths and really nurturing those in that important four. Also, an important four is things like medications. Um, that's where your transport comes in, all the structures, but this should be secondary after the important two. And often you can have meetings like this where people are very driven by provision rather than need or value, and the value and need must always come first. What a person likes about themselves, oh my gosh, I probably struggle with this question as well, but really being able to acknowledge ourselves, what we really, really love and value about ourselves, but also what other people admire about us. And when you pull together a person-centered planning meeting with these people present, it's so nice to hear all the wonderful things people have got to say about somebody, and the confidence in setting the tone of such a plan is absolutely fantastic. And we're in the middle of COVID restrictions and so forth, but actually thinking about creatively how these meetings could run, and if not everyone can be present, if a young person can interact with a screen, setting them up online is also possible. But where possible, I think they should be in person and use it as a drop-in where people can come throughout the session. What does a good day look like for me? I have a perfect day pictured in my head, what I would like to do on my perfect day. But it's really important, with our learners and outside news support, is really identify what a good day looks like. And we've already talked about good times of the day, but what is it about? Having breakfast in the morning? Is it about doing some exercise? Is it about seeing people? Some people just live off social interaction so much, and it's such a motivator. But really understanding what a good day looks like. What's traveling and transitions like? I'm really breaking those down and understanding that network. And then we start thinking about what resources are already available and what else is needed. And I think that's really, really important when we think about, what is in the network already, what adults and family members are already offering support. What does that support look like? What are the professional services around that looking like? But also, is there gaps where we can access resources we've not considered, and who in the network is able to contribute to make sure that that important two is as nurtured as much as possible. Um, and then who needs to see this plan? And the plan is owned by that individual. It is their plan. It's not the Senkos, it's not the teachers, it's not the parents. It's that young person's plan. If they can communicate who they want it shared with, that is absolutely fantastic. And we should really, really be honouring that. Otherwise, we need to think about who's involved in supporting this young person. Who can we share this plan with? So just a little bit more breakdown there about that important to the person and what's important for the person. And like I say, the important for is more about structures, where the important to is very much about their cares, their values, what makes them tick. The space you create for a person-centered plan should be positive, and should really focus on this idea of enabling rather than disabling. Um, it's it's about focusing on the opportunities that present themselves, and it's not about ignoring the challenges. It's not about that. But like I said previously, we really want to use what this person's good at, what people admire about them, what people value about them, as a thing that drives their aspirations forward, and using this space and time to have a real celebration. I've seen some pictures of person-centered plans where they've had like a Mad Hatter's tea party and everyone's come for tea, and the discussion's been about the person-centered plan. So you can run the meetings however you want. And the actual first person-centered plan I ever saw was in an adult service where all the walls were covered in paper, and by the end of the day, the whole room was full of comments and outcomes and where support was going to come from, what the important two was. But you could see this thread all around the room, and that young person was in the middle of this room surrounded by all of this fantastic positivity, um, all about what people can do rather than what they can't do. Um, a little bit more there on what a good day looks like, good times of day, traveling and transitions. And there's just some questions there are posed for you, and the slides are available. So do think about those questions when creating a plan. So we've got around 5 minutes left. So what I want to focus on is this particular network and this social network, and really making people available and coming to the space in this listening mode, this not preconceptions, not thinking with preconceived ideas about what support should look like. And the way of setting up this plan is when you send out those invitations, is very much setting up this network to be around. We're coming to talk about the young person, not the provision. And setting the tone is super, super important. And then keeping this network actively involved. For Asenko, a really good opportunity is the annual review, and I would recommend that this forms part of the annual review for an EHCP. So if you've come across that before, you know there's an annual meeting with the school where you review the provision and the outcomes, and sometimes those meetings can really become a box ticking exercise. They can be quite heated sometimes, they're not always constructive. So having this sort of format where the person's at the center should change the tone and make those meetings much more functional. So finally, I want to share some resources with you. So other things to consider is if you're using a person-centered plan to produce outcomes and objectives, I'm sure lots of you have come across SMART before, but SMART is super useful, but it's really, really important for that individual because it gives them, particularly if you're working with an autistic individual, they often want lots of the detail, and a SMART outcome or objective can provide a lot of detail. So the first one is specific, for example, and measurable. But the third one around achievable, you know, we want to set aspirational outcomes, but there might be a few steps before we get to those. And using SMART can really help build those steps to those outcomes. Relevant and time bound, you know, and time bound is super important because the idea is not to do a person-centered plan. It's like, oh, that's felt really good, that was really nice, and then forget about it. It's about having a cycle of review and improving and really developing it further. So this is a visual tool. It's referenced there. The links are actually in the handout as well. I've used this tool adapted. So I've taken this idea that you're on a path, and along that path, we have different questions, different exercises to talk about. And by the end, you reach this idea of you've just got enough support to reach those aspirations and outcomes. There's lots of other stuff on there, like such as budget and actions, and questions to ask. But what's nice is that ideal week as well. You can see the timetable there, and what support looks like and when support is happening. But I've used this in lots of different ways. I've used it with a learner who was obsessed and actually just loved, and I share this passion, for things such as Harry Potter. So we covered it in Harry Potter things, and you know, lots of broomsticks and things, and they absolutely loved it. And the motivation there was then, you know, to engage with the document. I've also had ones with TARDIS on before for Doctor Who. So you can really, you know, it's their plan, and it's about what they want and see on it. But the idea is to create a visual where they can be along the journey with you. NDTI is absolutely fantastic organization. They have loads and loads of support and resources available, and they're quite influential in policy in the UK. So I really recommend anyone checking out their resource bank. This is just one thing I came across, which is about anxieties and coping strategies, and really identifying things we're looking forward to above the line, and then things that we're not looking forward to. And then the box below, the left box, is very much focused on the individual coming up with strategies for themselves or being facilitated to do so. And the other box is very much about what other support might be needed. I thought that was a really nice way of looking at what's above and below the line and how we move things from below the line to above the line, especially if you have that student who or young person who's very reluctant in doing things, or scared about doing things, and how you can identify what they might need to move forward. These are just some more NDTI resources. I really like how these are formatted. I love those illustrations as well, actually. But important 2 and important 4 is on the right-hand side. I like how they changed it to what matters. I think that's a really, really nice way of looking at that, what good support looks like. And on the left, like and admire. It's just so superb. Like, I recommend, even if you don't take all aspects of this person-centered plan, is that like and admire just changes the whole confidence of that young person. And like I say, really sets the tone for going forward. Beyond autism, we have our own person-centered planning tools. So these ones are available in the links, but these are more about capturing information. Because like I say, every plan we do looks very different depending on the learner we're working with. So this is more of a data capture or a tool to make sure you're asking the right questions and have the right people involved. So that's available as well. And then finally, looking at the time, you might have to Google these afterwards because there is lots of good examples, but PATH and MAP. PATH is what you'd think it would be. It's building this pathway to, they call it dreams. So building a pathway to your dreams. And the MAP is a really nice visual tool of how to lay out person-centered plans. And I guess, I always like to ask, like, so I've shared all this information today as sort of like, so what? What's the point? Well, the point is, we shouldn't be just grabbing interventions or strategies because of a person's diagnosis. The diagnosis doesn't define a person. And it's very much about flipping that on its head, looking at the need, looking at that person, and then selecting the right support based on what they want. And this could be incredibly useful if you're involved in the HCP process or writing profiles for SEND support, particularly All About Me and that provision section. A care plan, as someone wants to be supported, if they do require medication or physical assistance, what that might look like. A person-centered plan would be really, really great for that. An assessment process, and this isn't an assessment, but it's a great stepping point before assessment and getting to know a learner, because it might alter what assessments need to be carried out. And ultimately, it's about improving the support and opportunities for that young person and what their future holds. So do download any resources which are available. We're doing quite a few lunch and learns over the next few months, every single month. Next month is Bernadette. She's our head of early years, and she's going to be talking, well, her title is really interesting. It's called Our Buses on Diversion, the Importance of Early Intervention and Building Parental Resilience. So she'll be presenting next month on the 25th. But we do have around 15 minutes for any questions that anyone might have today. So I know Dan's in the background, and hopefully he'll be able to feed some of them for us. So one of the questions come through is, love the creative approach some have taken in developing these plans. You mentioned about using person-centered plans as a tool for service planning and using local services around the individual. What happens if services aren't available for the young person? Well, I think the whole idea of person-centered planning is identifying what resources are available and what opportunities are there. There is the personal budget, which is a great resource to be able to have. And I've seen that used really successfully with families who have taken some ownership in delivering parts of that plan for the young person. But obviously, that also puts a lot of pressure on the families to do that, and their resilience is certainly really, really important as part of that process. But the person-centered plan is all about identifying what resources are available for that young person and what's there. And I think if they have an EHCP, the person-centered plan can really inform what the provision looks like in that plan. So the next one is, how would you identify and prioritize goals if the person is nonverbal? How often would you review the plan? So I think it's common knowledge that communication is more than what we just say. Communication is about what we do, how we behave. Often people say much more about what they are thinking in their tone, the way they use their body, and body language. And I think verbal communication is a really small percentage of actual communication. So what my approach has always been is to look at as behavior as a form of communication, looking at a child's motivations about what they're drawn to, what they want to do, what they push away, and what they avoid, and really prioritize around that. So I can use an example of an adult learner we were working with who wasn't really able to communicate what he wanted to do for a vocation, what he wanted to do after school. But what we did know is he hated being inside, hated being indoors, and he was smiling, laughing, jumping whenever he was outside. So we knew that we should be looking at careers which didn't involve sitting down and being inside. So we started approaching things such as horticulture, working with animals, being outside, and really started prioritizing those areas. So it is more tricky when someone can't say. Another option as well is to have an advocate, someone who's independent, who knows that individual really, really well, who can really advise. And advocates are often supplied from lots of different sources, but local authority, particularly around where people don't have the mental capacity to share what they want, the local authority are able to supply advocates as well. So what if a person can't manage to sit through a person-centered planning session? So I think, the environment should be very much set up for them wanting to be part of that meeting or that planning session. So having lots of things that they enjoy doing in the room, and it's very much planned around what they want to do for that time, I think it's really, really important. But actually, if they have something to say and it's just they can't sit in the meeting, then let's go where they want to go and they can tell us where they are, and really sort of focus on that. So, if they want to be outside running around telling you what they want to do, well, let's kind of go with that. It is about throwing everything out the window and really just looking at what that person wants to do and being motivated by them. Dan's just told me I didn't talk about reviewing the plan. So reviewing the plan is, like I say, if you have an EHCP, I think it should really follow that cycle. But actually, if they have an individual education plan, or you often get reports or that sort of cycle termly, I think, a good Senko will keep an eye on what that plan is and how that plan's being implemented in school. So at least once a year, but when anything also changes significantly in their life is a really good time to be reviewing that plan. Also, if anything's coming up, so there's lots of learners I'm working with at the moment now for September because they've got a change of school placement. So we're already creating those plans right now for September, and we're going through those discussions at the moment. So Dan's told me that there is no more questions. I do just want to thank everyone who attended today. The recording is available online, and you'll get a link to that after we finish today. Do join Bernadette's session on the 25th of February, which is very much about early intervention and building parental resilience. All of these are free of charge, and what I would ask you to do is, if you can, as a thank you, is complete the feedback today. We're always trying to improve our service and what we offer, and feedback is really, really useful to us in doing that. So all I can say is thank you for attending today. It's great to see so many familiar names in the attendee list. It's really great to see you, and thank you for attending. And I look forward to making connections with you next time. My email address is there, so do please feel free to email and get in touch. But thank you for your time today.